In another example, also using ArcGIS desktop, I've got the elevation for the continental United States, and actually I have the elevation for a bit more. I've got Alaska, for example, in here as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and map the temperature extremes. I'm sure you've all seen in the newspaper the daily high and low for the United States. What I did was I decided to map all of those. I just mapped 1 month, January 2009, and I symbolized that with ovals, H's and L's. I'm interested to find out what kind of pattern the high and low temperatures for each day in January shows. So here, what kind of pattern do you see? Obviously, we've got sort of a northerly trend to the low temperatures in January, but we also have something coming down right into Colorado and Wyoming. Well, if we take a look at the elevation legend, we can see that those areas are higher in elevation, so it makes sense. If you tie that into your lesson on, yes, latitude matters, but also altitude matters. And then we also have this southerly influence of the high and low temperatures with Southern California, South Texas, and South Florida. Now keep in mind this is January. What would it look like in July? If we tracked this, wouldn't we see in sort of an interior migration of these? We would no longer have South Florida being the high temperature in the nation, but rather we'd probably have the Mojave Desert. We'd have a lot of Death Valley showing up, maybe a few in Phoenix. We saw in the continental United States that higher elevations had a lot of the low temperatures. But after we zoom up to Alaska, we find that does not quite hold true, perhaps for a couple of reasons. For one thing, we've got this basin right here that's just to the north of Fairbanks, to the northeast of Fairbanks, and we have this large basin here between the Brooks Range and some of these Alaska ranges down to the south, where the cold air sinks and results in some really cold temperatures. I mean really cold. If I use the identify button on a couple of these points, let's take a look at the data. This is the I part of GIS, the information behind the scenes, and I'm going to look at the Birch Creek community in Alaska. On January 2, 2009, it had a low of 57 degrees F below zero. And then it was minus 64 the next day, and the next day after that it was minus 65. And actually, all through the month, it set the record. The lowest it was on January 10 with minus 68. Not for the faint-hearted up there. So, through this activity, we've seen that we have some pretty identifiable patterns, that they change throughout the year also, and that they change in extremes. What other kinds of data could you map that you see in maybe a local newspaper or a national or international newspaper, or in a magazine, or on the web, or in a newscast on the radio or TV every day that you might be able to map and look at patterns? Once we bring that data into a GIS environment, we can really dig into the issues, the trends, the patterns behind the data.